Tonight, we're here to celebrate the new book by Stephen Haff, Kid Quixotes, a group of students, their teacher, and the one-room school where everything is possible. It's the inspiring true story of a teacher struggling with mental illness, the silent daughter of an undocumented mother in a one-room schoolhouse that helped them find their voices, heal their pain, and become empowering models of resilience. We're very happy to have Stephen here with us tonight. With him in conversation is Sarah Stillman. Sarah is a staff writer at The New Yorker. She covers immigration, criminal justice, and more. She teaches journalism at Yale University and served as the founding director of Columbia Journalism School's Global Migration Project, producing team investigations into refugee and migration policy. For The New Yorker, she's written on topics ranging from civil asset forfeiture to debtors' prisons, and from Mexico's drug cartels to Bangladesh's garment factory workers. She's a 2016 MacArthur Fellow. Stillman recently won a National Magazine Award for public service for No Refuge, which is an investigation documenting more than 60 cases of asylum seekers and other immigrants deported to their deaths. She's now working to expand this collaboratively reported database, documenting the fate of US deportees around the world, from Somalia to Cambodia to Iraq. So happy to have you here, Sarah. Thank you for joining us. Before I turn it over to Sarah, Sarah will introduce Stephen. I just want to say that Kid Quixotes is available now from Booksmith. I know it says that we're out of stock on the website, but that's not the case. We're shipping directly from the warehouse to your house. I'll drop the link in the comments. Also, I hope in the comments, if you have any questions at all throughout the event, please add them in the comments, and we'll do a Q&A at the end of the program. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sarah. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. No, we have so much to talk about. You can see all the little blue tabs I have because this book, Kid Quixotes, will like break your heart open. And I'm just so grateful to be part of this conversation today with Stephen. So I'll do a quick introduction, then we can dive into conversation, and then we'll be doing the Q&A. So Stephen Haff is the founder of Still Waters in a Storm, which is this truly exceptional one-room schoolhouse in Bushwick, Brooklyn, that you're going to learn a lot more about today. And he taught before that at Bushwick High School for nearly a decade. And before that, did an MFA at Yale and went on to teach theater in New York and Vermont and Canada. And so I think we'll talk a little bit, Stephen, today about how that diverse kind of teaching and theater background wound up manifesting in some of the work that you're doing today and the work that informs the book, but in particular about what I would argue is the pretty radical pedagogy embodied in the book, which is really a pedagogy of deep listening and deep anti-oppression work. So I was thinking about how meaningful it feels to be having this conversation right now amidst a pandemic and amidst this moment, as the Booksmith folks alluded to earlier, of police violence and Black Lives Matter movements in the streets, because I would argue Kid Quixote is really this kind of model both for getting outside of loneliness and building community, and also this model for really uprooting oppression in the work you do. So as I turn it over to you to read, I just want to quickly say that the way I first met you is that you invited me to come read a New Yorker piece of mine to kids in the schoolhouse at Still Waters. And you asked me to read a piece I'd written about children from Central America who traveled by themselves to reunite with their parents in New Jersey and who got extorted and kidnapped along the way. And I thought it seemed like a little intense material to be reading to a group of kids who are, I think you said between ages of maybe 7 and 17, something like that. But you said no, like I said, do I have to censor this passage, or do I have to like retailer the material so it'll be fit for these kids? And you said, actually, like, we're here because we talk about the serious stuff of life. So that's what we're here to talk about tonight. You take these kids seriously, and it's all woven together in the book in a way that's pretty profound. So I want to turn it over to you to read to us a bit from the book, and then we'll get to start conversing.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. And thanks to Evan and Booksmith for having us. So I'm going to read a passage, about a 5-minute passage from the book, and I'll set up the context for you. This passage happens in the fall of 2016, just after the election. We're at Still Waters in a Storm, which is my one-room school in the Bushwick neighborhood of Brooklyn. a neighborhood of predominantly Spanish-speaking immigrants and refugees. 4 tables have been pushed together in the middle of the room. A group of kids, ages 5 to 17, whose families came here in desperation from Mexico and Ecuador, are sitting around the tables, facing each other. The one rule in this group is everyone listens to everyone. 5-year-olds listen to 17-year-olds, and 17-year-olds listen to 5-year-olds. Our ritual is the same in English, Spanish, and even Latin. Each person writes, then reads out loud as everyone listens. We're working on our Kid Quixote project, which continues today, 4 years later, collectively translating and adapting the novel Don Quixote as a series of brief bilingual musical adventure plays. The kids are reimagining the story of a delusional old man seeking adventures in Spain 400 years ago as the stories of these children here in this neighborhood right now. The kids have been writing about voyages because the Quixote is, after all, a road trip. One girl, Sarah, 7 years old, has been especially shy. She never reads her work out loud. This is her breakthrough. The only child not to read is Sarah. For the first 2 months of the Traveling Adventures project, she has been quiet during class. When asked to read her writing to the group, she has shaken her head no. Sarah has been coming to the Stillwaters writing class on Saturdays since the spring when she was 6 years old, but she has yet to read aloud her own work, always asking a volunteer or another kid to read for her and to protect her privacy by not revealing her name. The Quixote group is about half the size of the big writing class, and there's nowhere for her to hide anymore, so she simply refuses. Then one day in private, during a break, Sarah informs me that at her school, as she says, they're kind of rough on people. Everything you say is only right or wrong. She tells me that she sits at her desk in class, never moves, and never says anything. The school sent a social worker to inspect the house and interview her parents. The social worker asked if there is violence at home, but there isn't any. Sarah is just hiding, holding her mother's leg when faced with a stranger, or hanging onto her desk in class. At school, she doesn't know what is coming next. Play is not allowed. A vague threat of punishment for being wrong fills the air like humidity, and in her innocence, she is afraid. How do I help Sarah to be brave? I don't want to force her to read to the group. That could inflict trauma. I remember a story my paternal grandfather, Papa, once told me, a story that guides my teaching and illuminates this problem. At age 10, in 1917, he had won a bamboo fishing pole in a small town raffle, way up in the mountains of northern Idaho. His father told him he would need to wrap the pole in thread, an intricate procedure requiring great patience. His father said that he himself needed to rewrap his own pole, too. So they sat side by side on the porch and wound thread around their bamboo poles. My grandfather added at the end of the story that looking back, he suspected that his father didn't really need to rewrap his own fishing pole. Today, remembering Papa's side-by-side education and my father's tendency, as long as I can remember, to read whatever book I happen to be reading, so we can think side by side, I sit next to Sarah as we write. And when it's my turn, I read to the group, showing her the way by making myself vulnerable. I read, "There was a time when I thought nobody loved me. I called the city's phone number for depression. A woman answered and said her name was Sarah. Our little Sarah at Stillwater's looks up, and there is that face again, eyes and mouth wide open at the coincidence of names. She asked how she could help me," I read on, "and I began to cry. My mother had raised me to cry, telling me that whenever I needed to, I could let the tears fall and keep going until whatever was stopping me was washed away. And I couldn't stop crying for a long, long time. I cried so hard I choked and gagged and coughed, and boogers came out of my nose." The word boogers makes the kids laugh. But that grown-up Sarah did not hang up the phone. I kept repeating, "Nobody loves me." 2 hours of conversation later, after telling that grown-up Sarah that I had not left my apartment for days, eating only boiled eggs and saltine crackers and food left outside my door by friends I would not allow to enter, I agreed to go to the hospital. At the hospital, the psychiatrist, Heather, after listening to me for a long time, I don't tell the kids about the bandage on my wrist, told me she would rather have 2 broken legs than have what I had inside me. She promised me that I would feel better, but I would need to work very hard for a long time with the help of a therapist to understand my story. And she was right. The more I told my story, the better I understood myself, and the more peaceful I felt in my heart. I want the kids, especially the reticent Sarah sitting beside me, to know that here, in this room, in our sanctuary, it is safe to be vulnerable, which comes from the Latin for able to be wounded, because here, nobody will wound you. Here, you can breathe. No one will drop from the sky and carry you away. After weeks of refusing and listening and watching with those bottomless black eyes, as other children and grown-ups read their stories, on this one day, this day of vulnerability, Sarah, daring beyond daring, raises her hand, is called on, and begins to read. My mommy rode across the desert on the back of a tiger. That's how she came here from Mexico. At first, nobody speaks. Then, they can't stop asking questions. These questions are born not from doubt, but a love of adventure. Really? Yes, really, she told me in Spanish at bedtime. How long did it take for them to get across the desert? 2 weeks. How did they cross the border? They came to a very high wall. It went as far away as they could see, to the left and to the right. The tiger said, "I can't jump over the wall. You need to carry on alone now." My mommy said, "I know you can do it. You have very strong legs." My mommy held on to the fur of the tiger's neck. The tiger moved its head up and down and crouched and wiggled its butt. The kids all laugh. Every time they hear the word butt with 2 T's or 1 T, they need to laugh. Then it jumped over the wall. My mommy almost touched the moon. The tiger said, "I did it." My mommy said, "Yes, you did it for sure." I say, My cat moves her head up and down before she jumps up onto the refrigerator. Wow, says Sarah, that's high up. The kids have more questions. The room is jumping. How did they eat? The tiger knew where to find water and rabbits and cactus fruit and how to step away from snakes that were hiding under the sand. How did they get to Brooklyn? They walked all the way to Brooklyn, through the desert and the forest and the fields and the ghost towns and the swamps. Sarah speaks faster and louder as she goes, releasing a horizontal avalanche of words. Nobody tried to stop them? No. When they reached the city, they stayed on dark streets with not a lot of people. The shadows protected them. Nobody saw the tiger? Yes, strangers noticed the tiger and they were afraid. So they called animal control. The tiger fought back, she says, rising up a little bit from her chair. With its mighty paws and long, sharp teeth, but there were too many animal control humans with nets and ropes and a dart that made the tiger sleep. My mommy said, bye, and she cried. Her tears made lines on her dusty face. Sarah is now speaking in tongues, possessed and transported by the visions she has inherited from her mother. My mommy was sad for the tiger and sad for herself. She missed Mexico out in the fields. She missed the dirt between her toes and the wide open heavens above, more full of stars than darkness. Here in Brooklyn, the buildings blocked most of the sky. The electric lights erased the stars, and her feet, still bare, were punished by the unforgiving concrete. The tiger cried too, quietly, as it was falling asleep, and said goodbye. Animal control took the beast away in a cage inside a truck. There is an awe-struck silence in the room. What language did the tiger speak? Asks a teenager named Lily. Spanish. My mom didn't know English then. Time's up for today, I say. Thank you, Sarah. Good job, everyone. See you next time. As the kids walk out the door, they look stunned, as if they had just met God. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Stephen. That is such a powerful passage, and it gets at so much that's worth talking about, kind of where you began with this question of how you create space for vulnerability and how you inculcate courage in the classroom. So I think that passage is a great jumping off point for helping people understand, like, what is this one-room schoolhouse model that makes it possible for stories like that to come to the fore? Can you walk us through, like, literally how does it work, and how especially does the motto, which you mentioned, which is everyone listens to everyone, which can sound simple, but I'd love if you could unpack that and unpack the basic model of the schoolhouse.
Sure. So the one-room schoolhouse to me means a group of people in the room who are not segregated by age or by any other criteria. So you've got all the ages together, all looking out for each other, all learning from each other. And it's, in my thinking, it's like a Stone Age tribe might have been. You know, that our brain now is the same brain that we had in the Stone Age. And this brain evolved in a situation of a tribe or an extended family or perhaps a small village. And I think that's how we're wired. And that's what we need right now, is that sense that the whole family is together. And everyone in the family has a role to play, and we're all looking out for each other. And it's remarkable how peaceful everybody becomes and joyful once the whole family is there together. I used to teach at Bushwick High School for a number of years. And part of the problem, at least as I saw it, was that the kids were separated in different rooms according to their age. So I would have a room with 30 14-year-olds all together. And that was really difficult. And I think it was difficult because, and the kids acted up because they couldn't get what they most needed, which was loving attention. We're meant as teachers to serve in loco parentis, in place of the parent. But what parent ever in the history of Earth has had 30 14-year-olds all at once? I mean, no, it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. So of course kids are in distress. They can't get what they need. And school absolutely is a huge part of raising children in our culture. They're there like 6, 7, 8 hours a day, and then they go home and do homework. This is a major, major part of their life. And they're growing up in a kind of a distorted and unnatural way. So they'll do almost anything to get attention. And so when I had to leave the public school system because I had a massive mental breakdown, and I was diagnosed with bipolar depression after that, I wanted to return to teaching, but I wanted to do it in a way that was healthy for me as well as for the kids. So I invited my old students to come meet with me at my apartment. And I told them they could bring their cousins, their friends, some of them had children of their own at that time. So everybody was welcome. And that all we were going to do is write and then listen to each other read out loud and then have a conversation, not a critical conversation, just talking about the story that we just heard. So that became really, really popular. Everyone just loved it. And, we'd taken away all the apparatus of school, like report cards with grades and exams, especially standardized tests. We took away all of that, everything that's stressful. And we had in the room little kids and teenagers and college students and adults all together. And the problems of discipline in the classroom, of behavior, disappeared. They just vanished. And back in the school system, control is a high priority. And I'm not saying that there's anything wicked in that design, only that it's a necessity because of the way things are arranged. You've got kids who are desperate for attention, not getting what they need, not even close. And so there's all of this trouble with trying to manage that population and control them. And then that becomes the struggle. That becomes most of the effort and the time that you spend is somehow keeping this impossible situation under control. When if you just structure it the right way, that's not a problem anymore. People's natural desire to care and be cared for is fulfilled. And so that's where that comes from, that idea of the one-room schoolhouse and working across all ages together.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about one form of work that you do there, which is the Don Quixote reading, translation, transforming that into these adventure plays that get performed around town, at least pre-pandemic. I'd love it if you could just start by telling us, how did you all decide on Don Quixote? Why that text for a group of children?
Well, first of all, it's a great book. And it's probably the novel that made all other novels possible after it. So it's one of those stories that after you've read it, you see it everywhere in life. You see it on TV, you see it on the streets, you read it in every book you read. So it's one of those handful of books that does that illuminates everything in life. And it's it's tragic, and it's funny, and it's smart, and it's silly and beautiful and disgusting. It's everything that life is. And the most important part of that for kids is funny, because they love to laugh, and they laugh a lot in this class. And they immediately fell in love with Don Quixote and his friend Sancho Panza. They understood that these were opposites who were somehow friends, and they found it very funny from the beginning. I chose a Spanish book. I chose to have us translate a book from Spanish into English because it provides common ground between me and the kids and their families. I didn't speak Spanish at the beginning of this project. And then as we worked together, the kids and their parents were teaching me. So that was a great gift they've given to me, that now I can have a conversation in Spanish. But I wanted to find something that would allow everyone in the room to be an expert in some way. Like there's this old model in education that says that children are empty vessels waiting to be filled with knowledge. And what that does is turn the teacher into a delivery system for data, and it turns the kids into just vacant space, which they are not. They have their own thoughts. They have their knowledge, their experiences, their points of view, their sense of humor. They are full. They're full. And at the same time, they have a great eagerness to learn more. So I wanted us to do something together, side by side, just like in the passage I read, where, okay, I don't know Spanish as well as they know Spanish, so they can help me with that. I can help them with their reading and writing in English. I can help them with making choices about which words they want to use in their translation. And also I could bring to them my experience, my training, my professional experience in theater, as we turn this translation into a play, a bilingual musical play. So I have an education to offer them, and they have an education to offer me. So as a group, we work together, and everything is a collective creation, and we argue and debate and push each other until we reach consensus on every word, every lyric, every note, every line of dialogue, every translation choice, until we reach consensus. And whenever we get lost in the process, we just remember to go back to our one rule, our one algorithm for working together, which is everyone listens to everyone. And that always restores perspective and gets us back on track.
Yeah, I love that. Maybe we can keep talking about that methodology when it comes to how the kids actually would write these songs for the plays. Because having gotten to watch them around the table with that, it's a pretty unique process. And in the book, you talk about the rescuing song, for instance. So maybe you could talk us through, after the election of Donald Trump, like how that song got birthed and what the process was.
Yeah. Right. So right after the election, of course, everybody was stunned. We were sitting around the room together, ready to start, but nobody could talk because we were too upset. But finally, when we did decide to speak, we decided that we wanted to make the first song we wrote together be about the journeys of immigrants and the troubles they faced, because those are the stories of the children's own families. They all, just like Sarah's story from her mother about riding a tiger across the border, they all have stories, and those stories are a big part of who they are. So we decided that that would be our first song. It would be all about a journey to this country and the struggles along the way. So the way we did that, we would alternate brainstorming and writing. Each person would do, extensive personal writing about the stories they've been told by their parents and their own impressions and what they see on the news and the feelings and the fears and the desires that they have. So they would write. And then we would take turns listening to each person reading their writing out loud. And then we would respond by asking questions to understand better what each person was trying to say. And then people would choose sentences or ideas that they thought could work in a song, and ideas that moved them. And so they would do that, and then we would write out all those ideas that we had pulled from each other's writing. And then there were various ways of moving on from that. Like we would make a list of the most important words that we had heard that day that tell the story. So just a list of words, not even in sentences. And then we would say, well, the most important words are probably the ones that we want to showcase in the song. So we want those to be often the last word or phrase of a line in the song, of a lyric. And so we made those lists, and then we started constructing sentences that would end in one of those important words. And then we would try to rhyme those words, the last word, and come up with a sentence that would end with that rhyming word, and so on. So everything is built from the personal experiences and feelings and questions that the kids had, and then their practice of listening to each other and evaluating not what is best, like not saying, oh, that's such a great story you wrote, or you're a great writer, or none of that. Just listening to what the story is and saying, I think this part would be really powerful in a song. So it's not like evaluations you get in school where a teacher might read something and say, good work, and put an A or a B at the top of it and give it back to you. There's no such conversation here. Here it's all about how can we as a group tell our story and make everyone in the group feel like it's their story. So that's the challenge of adapting a 400-year-old novel. And it's also the challenge of making sure that everyone's story is not only respected and recognized, but celebrated.
Yeah, maybe we could talk through one more example, which is actually one of the times that I visited Stillwater's. I got there and there was, you had a book about suicide, an adult book, Kay Jamison's book about suicide on the table. And the kids started diving into a really difficult passage of Don Quixote about a man who commits suicide allegedly because this woman wouldn't fall in love with him, if I have that right, a shepherdess named, was it Mariella? What is her name?
Marcella.
Marcella, right. And then you write in the book about the song that emerged from the kids reacting to that very serious scene in the. I'm wondering if you could talk me through, like, how did you figure out that kids could take on material of this sort? Because honestly, being in your schoolhouse feels like being in a college seminar in terms of like the gravity of what people are taking on, kids are taking on. And so I'm wondering about that, especially in the context of mental illness as well, because you did bring up in the passage you read some of your own struggles in that regard. So I'm wondering if you can talk to us about those themes and how you figured out how to navigate them with the kids. Sure.
Well, I found out very early that the kids could handle talking about dark or difficult subjects because they chose to tell me such stories. They told me about what they were afraid of. I mean, right after the election, I think it was the Legal Aid Society was handing out papers that summarized what the rights of immigrants are and how to deal with it if somebody comes to your door, if like ICE, the immigration police come to your door, what do you do? because all of a sudden everybody, I mean, life was not easy before that election, but all of a sudden it just became hell. So, you know, this was what was on everyone's mind, was this profound fear. I'm going to be taken from my mother. I'm going to be separated from my brothers and sisters. And this is what was on their minds. And they carried it around with them. And when I told them that, you know, they could trust each other and trust me, and that it was important for them to talk about what they most needed to say, that's what they said. They told me those stories, which are stories of a trauma that even in my suicidal struggles with bipolar disorder, there is no match. There's no way that even my struggles match theirs in intensity and or profundity, or you know, the never going away fear that your life is going to be ripped apart. So I listened to them, and I took my cue from them, and then I decided to bring in my knowledge and my experience as well, to give them a kind of a wider view of trauma and mental and emotional suffering, because that's something I wish that when I was a kid, I had learned about. Because then later in life, when my own mental illness, you know, which I had inherited, it runs in my family, when that opened up, I had no idea what was going on. And I really wished I had known. And I wished that I had had strategies for dealing with depression. And you know, depression can be triggered, it can be the result of a genetic predisposition, but it can also be something that happens after a traumatic experience. So I wanted the kids to have a perspective, to know that this is something that they're not going through alone. And it's something people have gone through and are going through and will go through. And it might visit them again in their lives. And you know, pretty much for sure, they or someone they know will have such an experience at some point. So I was just trying to offer them what I know. You know, whenever I have a chance, when something I've lived through can be a benefit to them, I'll tell them. And they just, I mean, as you know, on that day, they listen to it, they talk about it, and then they refer back to Don Quixote and decide that there needs to be a song about this, because it's so painful. And the way our brilliant composer, Kim Sherman, the way that she put it to them was, a song happens when words are not enough. When the words can't get to the place you want to get emotionally, music can do that. So we decided that scene in the book where the young man he's already committed suicide, and his friends are going to pay tribute to him and bury him. And then at the burial, the woman who they all blame for his suicide shows up. And she gives a speech that is astonishing, especially for its day, written by a man, where she straightens out all the men, the boys, telling them that nobody else decides for her who she will love, and that it's her life, and she is the ruler of her own life. She makes her own choices. So then the kids got the idea that they could take this scene, they could take the idea of the suicide, which of course is terribly sad, and then the story of the woman who is saying, wait, you don't get to beat up on me, you don't get to blame me. You know, I never promised him anything, and that has nothing to do with me. I do not accept the blame. And so we put those two songs one after the other, just to show the wide range of understanding that the kids have about all of this, that even though the reaction of the boys was irrational and misogynist, that there was still compassion for not just the broken heart, but the broken mind that would go towards suicide. And that also at the same time, it was possible to hold two ideas in your heart at once. The other one being that a woman, a girl, like all the girls in our group, is the ruler of herself. And that became the title of the song, that was based on an essay that one of the teenage girls in the group wrote during class, about all the ways in which other people rule her life and how she is trying to find her own way, her own path, and make her own decisions. So that's an example of the amazing complexity that the kids can entertain in their minds. They can hold these ideas together and say, yes, these are part of the same story, and we can feel compassion for everyone involved.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I like that the song starts, I want to love who I love, right?
Yeah.
And there's so much they get through in that song. I have many other questions. I also want to flag for everybody that we want to hear your questions, and we're going to turn to those in a moment. We have a really good question from Readeropolis. And that question is, what is the most important lesson you've learned through adapting Don Quixote with the kids?
Well, I would say the greatest gift that I have received, or one of the greatest, is learning Spanish. But also, from the kids, I've learned resilience, and especially resilience through laughter, because they're able to do all of this. And the scene I just described with the suicide and the feminist anthem was actually at the same time very funny, without trivializing the seriousness of the issues. The kids are always able to find a funny side. And like I say, it does not trivialize or dismiss the seriousness of what they're talking about. But somehow, just like the novel Don Quixote, it manages to be serious and funny. Like you're laughing at their antics, but at the same time you realize there is deep and real tragedy underneath it all. So I've learned from the kids how to live with both, from the kids and the novel, how to say, well, life is both of these things. Life is heartbreak and tragedy and loss and fear. And it's also really funny and stupid, and you have to laugh. So yeah. I think
yeah.
Combining Quixote and the kids, that's been a great blessing for me. That's what I've learned from them.
Yeah. I'm partly laughing because I'm remembering from that particular day, after translating this discussion about suicide, there was a long debate between the kids about who had gone number 2 in the bathroom, and it was like 15-minute giggle session. So it is the ability to weave between that debate and the gravity of the question of suicide is the example.
And also, kids, I was going to expand on that idea that kids need to be kids,
Yeah.
In school, there's precious little joy. And one of the things that in my education, and also in what I've observed of education, you almost never hear teachers say something like, oh, reading is such a great pleasure. I love it. I love it so much. They tell kids to stay in school and keep reading. Reading is good for you. Mainly because you'll be able to go to college. If you read, you'll go to college. And then when you graduate college, you can get a good job. So basically what they're saying is the life you're living now as a kid doesn't really matter. It's the life of the adult down the road that matters. And I really object to that because, again, traveling back into the public school system, kids pick up on that. And they know that what you are pushing, or what the system is pushing, is a kind of grim determination to survive tasks that mean nothing to them in order to have a job that may pay more than another job 20 years from now. So what happens to their childhood? And so when they're in class, we're taking on major literature, profound literature, and talking about serious, difficult things that they need to understand in their lives. At the same time, the weave through it all is this sense of humor of the kids and their love of play. So they play soccer in the classroom. They run around on the sidewalk outside. You know, it's a storefront, and they just run around out there like crazy. They love playing. They love hanging out with each other and laughing. And then in class, they love playing with ideas and words in the same way. They can't get enough of coming up with alternate ways of expressing something. You know, once they get going and they catch fire, they, you know, the synonyms and, you know, related words, when we're debating a point of translation, they love it. They're laughing while they're doing it. They're laughing at how many words they can come up with and who can come up with the funniest ones. So it's all play. And then going back to the question from the audience about Don Quixote, Don Quixote is a story about two people playing pretend. So Quixote and Sancho are going on these adventures where they pretend, at least Quixote pretends, that a windmill is a giant, and you know, that sheep are soldiers, and you know, they're using their imagination and they're playing the way kids love to do. I know the kids at Stillwater's, one of their favorite games during a break is to set up a classroom and then pretend they have their own school, which they actually do with me. But then they take different parts and they spend the whole break acting, pretending they're teachers and students. And, you know, so Don Quixote is perfect for them because it's all about playing by using your imagination. And you know, and that's something, imagination then, it's not only, oops, you still there, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm still there.
Okay, yeah, something happened, something on my screen. So the kids, I lost my train of thought.
You're talking about imagination, just the imagination, all the generative nature of teaching them.
Yeah, right. They love to do it just for the fun of it. But also the great thing they're learning at the same time is that that you can use your imagination in order to learn compassion. So if you read a book, you use your imagination to understand the thoughts and feelings and experiences of the characters in the book. And if you are writing a story like they're doing together, you have to constantly be checking in with the characters you've created to ask how they feel in that moment. Mm-hmm. So when you're doing that, you are rehearsing for compassion in real life. Every game that kids play is some kind of rehearsal for real life. So this activity, in which imagination is front and center, is practice for them to become compassionate people. So when on the news they see people holding up signs that say Black Lives Matter, they know, not only because they have similar experiences, you know, as Hispanic people, as undocumented immigrants, you know, they're brutalized by rhetoric and physical violence, but also because they can put themselves with their imagination in the position of the person who's suffering. And at the same time, they don't want that person to suffer. And there you have compassion.
Yeah. I'd love for other folks to raise their questions. We're so curious to hear from you and what you have to say. So I'm going to read one from Cynthia Fitzgerald, and others feel free to chime in with your questions. We've got about 10 minutes for that. So the question from Cynthia is, did the kids ask you to read more books, and do you still keep in touch with any of the kids?
Oh, yes. So we've read a number of books along the way while working on this Quixote project. For example, well, we read a short story by Borges called The Library of Babel. And we adapted that story, and that's now a scene in the show where, you know, in our scene, the books sing. You pull a book off the shelf and it sings its song to you. And then we're always reading, if not entire books, parts of books that in some way relate to what we're writing. And then this summer, we're going to start a project in Latin, because I've taught the kids Latin in the past and they love it. They're crazy for it. Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah, they go like berserk with joy because they can't wait to solve the puzzle that is a sentence in Latin. They love that challenge. And as native speakers of Spanish, they have a real advantage that way because Spanish is almost a dialect of Latin. So in this summer, we're going to do a project where we're going to read the Aeneid by Virgil and in Latin. And as we read it, it's going to inspire the kids to write their own personal stories. And the reason I chose that book, of course, it's a classic, it's a great work of art, but it's also a story about refugees. You know, it takes place after the Trojan War, and the Trojans lose to the Greeks, and they have to leave their homeland. So they pile into sailing ships and sail the seas looking for their new home. And so I think it suits us as a group, and we're having a crisis at the moment because, you know, the pandemic has forced us out of our classroom and onto Zoom. And of course, Zoom is a blessing in many ways, but it can also it can be a terribly lonely medium as well. And we really miss the gatherings where we would have these ideas like we've been talking about, and the sparks just fly. The kids are like really catching fire off each other and generating an amazing amount of original thought. It's funny what Zoom can do to that process, how it can sort of create a heavy weight on top of something that has a very light spirit, and it becomes laborious and less joyful. So we've agreed that we're going to pause for now and come back in the fall and see how the world is in the fall. And in the meantime, we're going to be reading the Aeneid and then writing extended personal stories about this search for a home, because we can't go to our home and we're having to give it up because we can't pay rent on a classroom that we're not using. You know, I can repurpose that money to save up for our future home, wherever that is, you know, just like the Trojans would eventually found Rome. So where is our Rome? We don't know yet. And, you know, our sailing ship is Zoom. That's how we all stay together during this. So, you know, and also I can repurpose that money to help the families of the kids because they are not eligible for the federal stimulus checks, the relief money that everyone else can receive. So, you know, I'm using that money for that purpose as well, to help them survive a difficult time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as we wait for any final questions, I hope you don't underestimate all the work that you all are doing on Zoom, because I wanted to share one little thing that one of the kids, Jennifer, had said on one of the recent Zoom sessions, because it has been like my mantra carrying this moment through the pandemic. And if you wanted to share anything else about kind of what it's been like in this both pandemic moment and moment of collective action and protest around race, I know you have talked with the kids about that, but I'll just share quickly from Jennifer, one of the girls in Stillwater's. I think you had given us a prompt, which was write about a moment you felt uncertain, and you were helping the kids imagine how they can navigate this moment of uncertainty. And Jennifer wrote this really quick little story that I wanted to share, which was, she said, I wrote a story about a bird. The bird noticed there was no one in sight. He thought everyone was dead. Then he heard from his other bird friend, the humans are stuck inside their houses and they can't come out until their souls are healed. And that's just been running in my head on loop throughout all of this. We can't come out until our souls are healed. So if there's anything else you want, we've got actually one more question. Do you mind if we turn to one more question, and then I want to leave it open to you to share anything else you wanted to share about this moment or about the amazing book that you all must read, because we've only cracked the surface of the stories that are told in here, and you'll really get to see how it all plays out through the scenes and through the kids and through the songs. But this last question from Reader Opolis is, was there anything you found particularly challenging about turning your classroom experience into a book? Such a good question.
Yes. I would say that the classroom scenes were the ones that that posed the greatest challenge, because I wanted people to feel what it's like to be in that room with the kids, to feel like you can sit next to them and hear those profound poetic thoughts like Sarah just read. And I wanted people to have that experience, because we just have one room in Brooklyn. So it's not possible for many thousands of people to come to that room. But what happens there, I believe, is based on ideas that can help in many different settings, not just education even. So I wanted people to know what that feels like. That was my top priority. So I worked really hard on those scenes. And, in order to do that, I had to sit alone and just sort of summon the voices of the kids, because I know them so well, right? I mean, we've known each other for many years. And some of the kids who are now joining it weren't even born when we started this. So there's this great sense that we are this kind of random family. And I wanted readers to feel that. I wanted them to feel like they too can belong here. I mean, the issue of belonging is especially acute and intense for migrants and refugees, people coming to a new country, surrounded by people who speak a different language. That's all really difficult. But in this room, in this classroom, they have a place where they really do belong and they feel safe. And I wanted people to know what that can feel like, because most of us have been through probably a fairly typical education system. And I love public education. It's a very important ideal, and I don't want it to die. But I think there's a way that it can fulfill its promise by being more public, by being more inclusive, and in the way that I'm describing, restructure it so everybody is together. And I think that when people experience it, and I think they can through the book, then they might understand why it matters so much to us, and how it could help in other situations. And I've been thinking, over the last while, when all of the protests have been happening around the world about police violence and racial injustice, I come back to the one simple rule, the algorithm for interacting in a group, and I believe it applies to any setting, and that's everyone listens to everyone. Not everyone gathers to listen to one person, but to have the discipline and the devotion and the patience to stop and listen to each person, because as my father, a mathematician, always told me, every person is a special case. In mathematics, you have certain rules or axioms, certain general truths, and then you have special cases, which are exceptions to those rules. And my dad always told me that every person is a special case. You got to be very careful of grouping people and saying, these are this type of person or that type of person. No, 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 no. It's this person and this person and this person. Individual special cases. So when I say everyone listens to everyone, I mean everyone. And I think the implications of this, whether it's in education, business, politics, whatever setting, whatever the goal, that it forces us to ask about the structure of what we do and to build into that structure this egalitarian ideal.
Well, that's such a good place for us to end, because I really do feel like this is a book filled with special cases, and really all of you out there who have listened so thoughtfully, we're really grateful that you joined us here. We're grateful for your questions, and we're grateful that you'll take the time to go to Booksmith's website and purchase this book. Evan, thank you so much for organizing this. And
Yes.
really, it's an incredibly special book that in this moment, and really in any moment, is going to teach so much about how we use this special case to open up on the kind of reality we need to make for ourselves here. So grateful that I got to be part of this conversation. I'll turn it over to close out.
Yeah,
Thank you. Oh, thank you both. Thank you, Sarah. This has been wonderful, and Stephen, thank you so much, and congratulations again on the book. I wish that I'd had more teachers like you when I was coming through the system. I feel like this is the kind of education that I had been hoping to have. Congratulations, but more importantly, thank you for doing this important work.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome.
So the book is Kid Quixotes by Stephen Haff. You can order from our website, booksmith.com, and we'll ship it right to you. The link is in the comments. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I hope we can all meet in person sometime soon. In the meantime, please take care and stay well. And have a good night. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye,
Stephen.
everyone.
Thank you, Evan.
Bye.
Take
Thank
care.
you, Sarah. Bye, Evan.
Bye.